little about myself. So, and the presentation that I'm making. So, I got to know Magic in 2014, and I started judging in 2015. When I became a judge, I wasted no time finding events to judge and worked as many Grand Prix trials as I could in my first month of judging. We called them GPTs back then. Back then, these GPTs required level one judges, and I was fortunate to. Well, I did so a month into judging, and it was for a World Magic Cup qualifier, the first one for that year. Back then, I already had some experience applying for a job outside of the Magic world, but then I still wondered how applying to judge an event would be any different. There was a cover letter prompt after all. So I Googled how to write a cover letter for Magic judges, and several results told me to write down my experiences, my goals for the event that I'm applying to, and my needs, and just put that in letter form. So for my first cover letter, I did that, and I created a template that I could just copy paste from, thinking that this would save me sometime in the future when I needed to apply to an event again. So I had a template. Fortunately, I got accepted to that event. But then the template that I made, it got old really fast. And I'd like to begin my presentation by talking about why that happened and why I advise against copy pasting from a template when making your cover letters and just, filling in a few blanks, changing a few words here and there, and then clicking the submit button when applying to events. So I'll just talk about the issues with templating that I ran into after my first uh, bunch of applications. So the format was experience, goals, and needs. That was the recommended judge cover template back then that I looked into, and there were three main issues, one corresponding to each of the different parts. So first, regarding experience, the numbers game really felt empty. 1 month into judging, I wrote this portion of my cover letter with like a header, and it says experience, and then it just listed the different GPTs I managed to work in my first month of judging. By the second time, I was writing a cover letter, which was roughly a month after that for the second WMCQ that year. The list was very long and repetitive. It didn't really tell much about me or what I could do for the event, so there was very little personal info. Um, and so I graduated to talking about what teams and roles I've taken on for other organizers. But then even checking off the lists of teams and checking off the lists of roles that I've already taken on, with several cover letters more, it felt very repetitive, and it didn't seem too relevant at some point. Uh, Worse was that starting cover letters that way by and stating my name and then listing down my experiences, it just felt more like feather spreading than actually saying something relevant and connecting with whoever was reading my cover letter. It was just like a list, and then what after that? Second, regarding goals. So goals get accomplished and they get changed over time. So rehashing goals with each cover letter uh, gives the feeling of stagnancy. Uh, there's also a slight worry that the event manager that for the event that I'm applying to is the event manager of a previous event that I applied to, and that event manager might know me and might notice that my goals aren't exactly changing. Well, it's true. There are generic goals that you know don't seem to get old, but don't really say much, like gaining more experience or getting better. While that might be true, they don't do anything in the way of setting you apart from other applicants. There are goals that aren't accomplished over the course of an event, like leveling up or securing a badge on Judge Academy. But even those long term goals have sub goals that can better inform organizers on how you being on staff for that event helps you move further along the process of accomplishing that goal. Lastly, concerning needs. When I applied to my first event, the only need I could think of at the time was to borrow a judge shirt because back then I had none of my own. Uh, Fortunately, I was allowed to borrow one, but then I didn't want to have to go through that for each event that I applied to, and I wanted to avoid that problem. So I asked around veteran judges who were my size, and whether they had an old shirt that they were just willing to retire, maybe I could buy for a song, or they could just let me have it. And eventually, I secured one of my own. Uh, with more events concerning needs, I'm able to anticipate what I will need for the role that I'm applying for, and I need less and less from the organizer. So needs I have for my judging goals are coordinated more between the judge I'm working with. And eventually, I found myself omitting the needs portion from the cover letters I was writing. So a few months into judging, I realized that the recommended template might not be the most ideal for me, particularly with my way of communicating with other people. No one way of writing fits everyone, so take the tips included in this presentation as they apply to you. But please write cover letters. If you copy, paste, and submit from a template, it's likely that you missed out on a chance to include something in your cover letter that could tip the scales in favor of you being accepted for that event. So, what's in this presentation for you? What will be shared today aims to make cover letter writing much easier and aims to help you develop a flow for writing that will work for your needs. So the tips look to make your cover letters more effective in connecting with the manager for that event, the person the letter is addressed to, and communicating the information that is sought after by that particular organizer. It also seeks to make your cover letters efficient. So while not all cover letters are read, it's more likely that the event manager will read a short cover letter with all the pertinent information that they're asking for rather than a wall of text. So, that being said, let's get started with the presentation. So, first step towards writing a cover letter is not actually writing, it's reading before you write. So, I'll just do a quick glance at the chat and just maybe do a quick survey for whoever who will respond. So, how many of you have clicked the link to an event on the events page of Judge Academy and immediately clicked the apply button without actually bothering to read the event description? So, I'll just take a quick glance at the chat and see has anyone done that? Like you just open the event on JA and then you just apply without actually reading what the event was expecting of the judges. There, apply now, ask questions later. I do read. Okay. Oh, so Sugeng did that on Judge Apps. Some people would rather not say. Okay. So it appears to be a mix. Some people do read. Some people apply first and then read later. Somebody scrolls immediately to the compensation and then applies immediately without probably reading the rest of it. And some read it through and through. I highly recommend you to take a minute or two to read the event description, be it for a tournament or for a conference that you're applying to. There is a reason why that event is organized, and the description of the event usually sheds light on the goal of the organizer. Like, for example, for this conference, Felix wanted to create a simulation of a judge journey from application until the writing of the tournament report. And if you read the description, you'll actually find that out, and it will guide you as to what the tenor of what you're trying to say. So, are you applying to be a judge at a competitive modern event, but then because you didn't read the description, you didn't realize that the event is only taking applications for staffers to man the prize wall booth? Sometimes, are you applying to an overseas conference because conferences are down this quarter, but then you didn't realize that it is only accepting Spanish-speaking judges? It's good to double check exactly what you're applying for and what you're getting into. In the latter example that I gave, you would know that writing your cover letter in Spanish would check a box in your reader's mind that, well, you're Spanish fluent and you're probably going to make it through that conference and take something away from it. Next, check your reader. So while there are a bunch of people who could read your cover letter at some point during the solicitation process, it's likely that the organizer or manager of the event will be reading it. You'll find the information on the organizer or the manager in the 4 questions contact X person field in Judge Academy. It's also possible that an event manager is designated by the organizer in the description. So checking for your reader allows you to familiarize yourself with how well the reader knows you. This allows you to filter information that may not be necessary or just may sound weird or awkward. So, for instance, if you're a level one judge being mentored by Felix, applying to this conference and then saying in your cover letter that my mentor Felix is recommending that I check out the seminars on offer in this conference, it might not be the most useful thing. Felix is actually the one who reads your cover letters. Uh, Lastly, check your event organizer. So if you've been accepted by the organizer before to work at their events, it's good to backtrack in your event history who the manager was the last time you were accepted. So if that last event was recent and the manager would likely recall you having worked for that organizer previously, you can omit certain information on what you did. You don't have to go down into detail. If it's the same organizer, but then there's a different manager this time around, manager's experience with you, maybe a resource for the new manager in deciding whether or not to accept you to the event. Okay, so knowing your reader or organizer also spares you from very generic openings. Like, what's a common one? Maybe to whom it may concern. That's a very common way to begin a letter, which is also very awkward, especially if it's in a setting that isn't exactly too formal. If you're 100% sure who will be reading your letter, it's nice to address it to the person directly. It's a step in the right direction to connect the indicator that you didn't just copy the letter from a previous event and use it again. Just make sure that in the event that you do those things and you just change the name, make sure that you at least change the name of the manager that you indicated in the cover letter, especially if you're just copy pasting. But I still discourage you from doing that. But having the information on your reader also guides the tone of your letter. So if you're sure that the reader is a friend of yours, you can keep the tone friendly, but still maintain a degree of professionalism. If you're sure who is reading your letter, addressing it to the organization. If you're not sure, or rather, if who is reading your letter, like they just give like I don't know chain links or Oracle events, addressing the letter to the organization you are applying to, and keeping the tone of your letter professional would be best. And these are things that you find out by reading the event description and what information is provided on the event page. So, what else can you do before you write the cover letter? So apart from reading what information is available, it's advisable to seek outside info, basically extra info outside the event description, especially if you've never worked with the organizer before. Check other events by the same organizer and see how see accessible easily with Judge apps. I'm not very well versed with Judge Academy technology, so I'm not sure whether that still appears. But before you could actually check who was previously on staff. If you know somebody in person, like personally, who worked for an organizer, you can go to them directly without going through Judge Academy. Just start a conversation and ask about their experience with that organizer. That can give you an idea where a judge with your skill set can fit in the bigger picture. So, if for instance, what's an example? Let's say your friend tells you that while the tournament they ran with that organizer went smoothly, product prep and product distribution maybe it was a mess, and you in your cover letter you can write how you managed to run a mixed format nationals with both constructed and draft, which would then hint to your ability to solve that particular problem. Also, if you take this approach and talk to a friend, don't forget to ask if you can reference this interaction between you two. His name. This interaction between you and your friend, matter of factly, as an opportunity for improvement for the organizer rather than a form of criticism. That's a key thing for tone, and that will be better received. Let's say you don't have a friend who worked for the organizer before. The judge manager's information is usually available in a Judge Academy event. So try emailing the judge manager some of your questions. You may not always get a reply, but it's a shot in the dark at no cost, which can pay off in the long run. That's because it's more likely for a judge manager to recall a single judge who emailed to ask about the needs of the organizer and how he can improve his odds to get accepted into the event than somebody who did not and just applied. If you're unable to do either of these things, talk to a friend or email the judge manager, but you still want to leverage any connections with the organizer by dropping the name of someone you think they might work with or who can vouch for your ability, do so at the opening of your letter, while you still have the reader's attention. So make sure you get the permission of the person who's the key to consulting with other people regarding applying is to ask open-ended questions and facilitate discourse. Like for example, here's an example in the slide that I messaged another level one judge who got accepted to GP Kuala Lumpur. I think that was 2016 or 2017. I asked the person, "Hi, I didn't really know who he was, but I just managed to throw that out there. I saw that you were previously accepted to a GP by Chainlinks as a level one judge. I'm applying to their next GP as a level one, and I need some tips. What are some of the things that they look for in a level one, and what role did they give you at the previous GP you were at?" So I asked that question. I didn't get a reply, but it's an open-ended question that would have facilitated some form of interaction between me and the judge I asked that question to. And these are the kinds of questions that you want to ask the people you are consulting before you write your cover letter. So before I proceed with the opening of a cover letter, I will just check the chat and see if yes, I agree with Loco. Make sure you don't name drop without um, asking permission. That is not very professional. Okay, so no questions so far. Chain links, yes. Uh, First organizer who accepted me. Okay, so let's start with the beginning of a cover letter. People, so that now that you've done enough reading and pre-work, it's time to actually start writing. So starting a letter can be a very awkward process for people, especially if you're introverted or you don't really do a lot of writing, saying "dear person X" when the person is not likely to even know of you, or is not exactly dear to you. It can feel very awkward when you're typing it down. Also, again, very neutral and generic to whom it may concern might be best saved for a corporate environment rather than the judging world where your reader um, is not a fellow enthusiast who shares your passion for magic to some degree. Um, so being a professional, sort of friendly, and offering that virtual handshake is definitely a good way to start. Again, if you can call the manager by name, go ahead. Especially if you're sure that that's their name. Try to avoid usage of nicknames if you aren't actually sure that's their nickname. So this is a good opening. Good day, manager's name, uh, rather than something that's very generic. It starts your letter very strongly and gives an air of confidence. Uh, so several studies online that I've read indicated that anywhere from 30 to 50% of cover letters don't actually get read. So having a very dry way of writing your way into the letter is not advisable. Uh, like for example, these two lines, the ones in the box on top. I'm applying to be a floor judge at your event, or I'm applying as an attendee to your conference. These lines don't actually add any new information to the cover letter. Your reader already knows that you're applying because you sent your application, and if the event has checkboxes for roles, uh, your reader will likely know the role you're applying for as well, since you checked the box. So you could do better by directing the attention of your reader to what you bring to the table, should you be accepted to that event. So for starters, you can treat your next event or conference like applying for a job. What do you bring? What value do you add? The organizer wants to know what you can do for them, be it as a floor judge or the organizer of the conference. Wants to know what you can do for them as a presenter or as an attendee. Are you familiar with the different teams of judges at a large magic event? Can you be counted on as a member of any one of those teams? Can you lead if necessary? Can you present if necessary at the conference? Um, my research when I was starting to apply to the events encouraged me to box myself into an experience goals needs template. So instead of listing down your judging experience, save you and your reader the time by stating why having you on board can make a difference in the event that you want to judge. Here are some examples that you might want to try when you write your cover letter. So the first one, I have two reasons why you should have me on board. That does two things. One, it adds organization to your cover letter. It already gives you a flow for at least your next two paragraphs. And you know, you can talk at least your next two sentences. You can mention two things that would convince the organizer to accept you. The second one, uh, concerning conferences, uh, opening with I am an active contributor to rules forums, um, attests to your capability as a participant in the conference. Excuse me. So if you say something like this, it hints towards how you will participate in the conference. The organizer would have some hint that when there is a rules discussion in the chat, or if the topic is rules related, the organizer probably won't expect dead air from you, or won't expect you to be just lurking in the background, since you will be in your element when such a situation arises, and you will be able to contribute to the discussion in that conference, thereby boosting your likelihood of being accepted. So, directing the attention of the organizer this way uh, starts your letter very strongly, rather than just stating the obvious. Next, matching event needs with your strengths. Let's say you're able to connect with your reader already with a strong opening. Good day, Felix. I have two reasons why you should accept me for this event. Felix already has your attention and is interested in reading on with your letter. So you need to match the event needs with your strengths so that your organizer gets an idea of what you can do for better idea of what you can do for them. So you need to build on that opening by painting a clear picture of how you can positively impact your event. Should you get to the event, should you get to say, if you don't particularly like talking about yourself, to make this easier for you, I highly suggest that you remain honest with your claims and state things as a matter of fact. How does one do that? Uh, take the first example. So answering the question, "What are you good at?" It, the response is the thing that you will write down is, "I'm a highly effective side effect." Okay, that's fine. But if you're not comfortable with that particular strength of approach, avoid adjectives that you can't substantiate without going into too much detail or extending your cover letter beyond what is reasonable. So you might be tempted to say, "I was able to effectively and efficiently manage side events at several Magic Fests." But then even that would leave your reader asking, "How were you effective? How were things efficient?" If you don't want to go into detail, you can just state the fact and say, "I have several Magic Fests worth of experience as a side sleeve." There is no adjective there that you need to expound on, and it states things as a matter of fact. Um, that's one approach. If you're more comfortable coming on strong, you can say instead, "I am able to effectively manage side events at Magic Fests. At your event, I can ensure that players easily find their on demand side events and that your scheduled side events start on time." So, depending on what is more authentic for you, choose that. Uh, Depending on your cover letter, in your comfort in coming on strong in your cover letter. Uh, some people, they're not very confident, or they don't sound authentic highlighting their own strengths. Uh, Especially that's particularly common in Asian settings. People are more soft spoken here. Uh, you can state something that you have done that is relevant to the needs of the event uh, in quantifiable matter of fact form. So check answering the question "what" instead of something that is very general. So there are two ways to do. Here are two ways to do this. So the first example. So it says, "I was able to serve as the main event scorekeeper during the peak event each open which had 256 or 150 player events. So this makes use of comparison to substantiate your claim. There's a comparison between a previous role that you have taken on successfully and the role that you are applying for. But this is something that you need to be very delicate about. Be sure to do this in a way that emphasizes your capabilities rather than belittles the role that you are applying for. Adopting the correct tone here is essential. Wrapping it in the correct context is essential. Um, Regarding using the correct tone, we'll get back to that later in the presentation. But here's an approach that you might want to consider: comparing a previous role to the one that you're applying to demonstrate that you are qualified. So let's take a look at the second example. It says, I delivered a seminar on missed triggers at the Magic Judge online seminar series. I can update my presentation and deliver it at your conference. So the second example demonstrates prior preparation. This is more common to use in applications for presenter in judge conferences. If you have delivered a particular seminar before, you can state that and include the offer to tailor fit it to your upcoming audience, hopefully, uh, for the organizer. If it would it be if your cover letter lacks a little more detail, maybe offering the link to your previous presentation so that they can check it out is also viable. Uh, but if you do either of these things well, just match event needs with your strengths and substantiate your claims or state things matter of factly, the first part of your cover letter can end here. So that's the first part, opening strong. So before I move on to the second part, I will just check the chat. Mm-hmm. So, yes, legitly apply for a job. Yes, says don't submit blank cover letters even if you're new. Say it. Yes, it's important to be honest when applying. Um, Later on in the presentation, I'll go into briefly into overselling and underselling yourself. Uh, Basically, you have to appraise yourself correctly, and if you're able to appraise yourself accurately, that does wonders not just for yourself professionally, but also for the organizer, since their expectations are managed with acceptance. So yeah, that's the first part of the cover letter. Yes, QJ also said reminds us to use gender neutral salutations if you don't know the gender of the reader. That is if you are using a pronoun to address the reader of your cover letter. That is possible too, but try to use but you should be using gender neutral salutations, especially if you're addressing it to readers which are particularly sensitive on that topic. So, yeah, Ian says nicknames are important. Um, Safeguard. Don't be so loose as to use nicknames of persons, especially if you're not on a nickname basis with them. Just keep a professional tone. But if you're friendly with the manager, um, keep it authentic. If you're friends, call them by what you usually call them. So there. So the next part of the cover letter is following through for yourself. So you've completed the second step in the process of writing a cover letter, so opening strong. With that, you can begin following through for yourself. One of the differences between applying for a job and applying for an event as a judge is that your cover letter can be a two-way street. So a company putting up a job offer would be interested primarily in what you bring to the table. They'll just train you afterward and then see how it goes from there. How you grow into the role that you applied for will come later, during or maybe after training and after onboarding. In the judging world, though, it's very possible for your reader to be interested in your growth as a judge. An organizer of a conference would be interested in how you boost the impact of the conference on the growth of the judges participating, regardless of the capacity they are participating in. If possible, the organizer would want to extend the impact of the conference beyond the hours allotted for it. Follow through by letting the organizer know how being part of the event, tournament, or conference would benefit you. So, talking about judging goals, uh, I think that part of what makes event applying to events and conferences on Judge Academy so fulfilling is that it's a collaborative process. While a degree of professionalism is appropriate, much like in a job application, you can anticipate much more support from the organizers trying to find a role for you that lines up with your goals as a judge. A good follow up to a strong opening is a short paragraph on your judging goals. Be specific and avoid things that lead to more questions in the mind of your reader. So, what do I mean by be specific? You would want to avoid generic statements like, I want to gain more experience as a judge, or being part of this event will help me improve. These things look templatey and give the impression that they were rehashed from a previous cover letter. Um, Try tying what you want to do to a specific thing that you want to achieve. For example, instead of saying, I want to gain more experience as a judge, you can say, I want to be part of the Kickstarter team for at least one of my working days at this Magic Fest. Experiencing each of the different teams at large events is important to me because I'm looking to apply to other big events overseas. So there's a lot to be excited about when it comes to magic and judging. And it's very easy to drift off course when you write this portion. It's easy to gush about what you want to achieve as a judge, what you're excited about in the program, but be realistic in the goals that you set, um, especially for the event that you're applying for. Some goals, just leveling up, are achieved over time, but giving a rundown of how far you are along the leveling up process might be a little out of place for a cover letter that seeks to determine whether or not you should be accepted for this event. Uh, your list of your advancement checklist might not be something that you want to copy paste onto your cover letter. Instead, focus on how getting the role you want takes you one step closer to achieving a long term goal. If you want to use a long term goal, so um, mix short term goals and long term goals. Um, I try to have at least one of each for an event that I apply for. So be it leveling up, um, that's a long term goal. Working on a specific team, short term goal can easily be achieved in that event. Working with a specific judge, like somebody who I'm soliciting a review from, or who is soliciting a review from me, achievable with one event. Being involved with venue setup and strike down. So in Magic Fest overseas before there was like a setup team and a strike down team. Experiencing that for the first time is considered also a viable short-term goal. Kickstarting events, as mentioned earlier, um, also a short-term goal. Presenting and working as an admin, also a short-term goal. So just depending on what it is you're applying for, have a mixture of these things. Um, Whatever you're willing to talk about and you're able to provide some details on, that is relevant to the organizer. So keep goals connected to your event application and always ask, can you really realistically achieve them? Having so many details about your goals and going all over the place is not going to help your case in getting accepted for the event that you're applying for. So more on this, working for versus working with. So I mentioned that when I started applying for the events, for events, the names portion of my cover letter was filled by a request to borrow a Judge Polo. Uh, this is a small need, but some of my cover letters did include it, especially if the required uniform was something I did not have. But consider the ability to include something like this and still be accepted. That speaks volumes about the kind of support that you get for an application in the judging world. It's something as simple as that, but then it's something that's entertaining. It's in contrast to a job application where you have to appear self-managing and self-sufficient somehow. Um, but in the judging world, you can communicate your needs professionally, but honestly. Let's go back to the example I mentioned earlier. Wait, just so I can get you guys on board. Example, I'll type it in chat. Example, I want to be part of the Kickstarter team. Starter team for at least one of my working days at this Magic Fest. Experiencing each of the different teams at large events is important to me because I'm looking to apply to events overseas. So that's an example. I added it to the chat. That in itself is a lot of information in a couple of sentences regarding your goals. But you can add to that even more and add to the considerations of the judge manager by being upfront with your circumstances. What can you add? So take that example in the chat. You can actually add this. At present, my country's big events don't offer that many scheduled side events. So a Kickstarter team is not necessary here. But I want to develop as a side event Kickstarter anyway, so that I can take on that role outside my country in the future. Um, Explaining yourself that way brings no guarantee that you will get the role you want. Uh, but in the event that the organizer is unsure of which judge to put in that role that you requested, and they decide to go through the applications to guide their decisions, yours will definitely stand out. You didn't just say what you wanted. You didn't just say why you wanted. You said also why you can achieve it at this event, and it would be ideal for you to achieve it at this event and not anywhere else. Additionally, indicate any collaboration that you will be having with other judges during the event, uh, which that may guide the organizer staffing decisions. Like, for example, if you have a prior arrangement with another judge who will be shadowing you or who will be evaluating you for a specific purpose, indicate that as well. While it's possible that the head judge or judge manager will be sending a future email to accepted staffers for role requests, that happens in large events. Getting ahead of that slightly and indicating that you will be working with another judge may be of some help in getting you accepted. First part, getting the other judge accepted. Second part, and third, you two getting placed on the same team. So that's the second part of the cover letter writing process. When you're actually writing, you open strong, um, you come up with what you can offer to the event organizer, and then you follow up with what's in it for you. Now that you've had those two parts together, the last part will be closing with a purpose. But before that, quick glance at chat. Nothing so far. Okay, so your cover letter is almost finished. And you've caught the reader's attention and you've been forward about what you want to get out of the event. Wrap up your cover letter in a way that stands out. So, maximizing attention span. Closing a cover letter is a challenging thing to do. You need to make sure that your cover letter isn't a chore to read already. At the same time, you don't want to waste the connection that you built with your reader on a closing that you don't really mean. When closing your cover letter, it's good to note that your manager is probably going through tens or if not hundreds of cover letters, and your cover letter is just one of them. If you were typing your cover letter in the Judge Academy text box, which adjusts for size, um, I highly suggest that you copy paste it onto a word processing software, Google Docs or something like that. Uh, because if it's anything more than a page, or if it's even close to a page, it's probably too long. Your reader will likely pass over larger portions of your cover letter, and they will not get the full message you're trying to convey. If you feel like this is likely to become your problem, uh, you please pay special attention to the next portion of the presentation on reviewing your cover letter. But yeah, pay attention to the length and keep it nice and short. Um, but assuming your cover letter is fairly light and can be read at a glance, you're on the right track. You can now close your cover letter with a statement that communicates your excitement for the role. This may defy all conventional letter templates and instructions on complementary closes, especially for business correspondence. Um, Business correspondence, corporate writing, I encourages you to use um, different complementary phrases, complementary clauses to end your letter, uh, like sincerely or yours truly. Uh, so those work, but they could be better. While you still need to maintain a degree of professionalism with the manager that you're working with, you aren't bound by the rules of conventional business letter writing. Um, like I said, they can be better. Maximize the space you're using by closing to remind your reader how much you want the role. So here are some examples that you might want to try. Let's say you're judging a GP overseas, hoping to judge my first GP in Japan, comma, signature. Or looking forward to sharing my passion for gender sensitivity and inclusivity to judges in your region, comma, signature. Um, Using these examples, like take for example the first one, uh, it's able to show the reader that it's not just um, you're not just going through the motions when writing your cover letter. There's something that you're genuinely excited about. Um, if in the case of the first example, your first GP in Japan, the reader of your cover letter would know that there's something that excites you even outside of the event. You're happy to be there. In the second example, uh, it tells the reader a lot about how you really like the topic that you're going to present at the conference that you're applying for as a presenter. Uh, and I think there will be very few managers for judge conferences who would select a dry topic that keeps getting presented over and over again at conferences over something that can potentially be useful, especially if it's in theme for the conference, and something that is that the presenter is passionate about. Um, it will be a very difficult choice for that judge to not for the manager of the conference to not at least be interested in your application for presenter if you are genuinely excited about the topic that you are volunteering. Lastly, when you close your letter, sign based on familiarity. Sign based on the name the reader would know you by. If you are not on a nickname basis with a person reading, it's best to keep your signature to your Judge Academy profile name, as that is the name that will be associated with your letter. Like, for example, signing my cover letter as Ben when the organizer doesn't really know me would raise questions because the cover letter is actually coming from someone named John. So just sign based on what would be easy for the um, organizer to look at. Last part of cover letter writing. Wait, quick chat. Always read your letter, says Benny. You never know when the typo sneaks in. Yes, typos are one thing. Uh, Fortunately, many word processing software and Grammarly, they sort of fix that for you. Uh, Not entirely, but almost. Uh, Also, the key things that you need to review in your cover letter, um, we'll also tackle that in the next portion of the presentation. So reviewing. So now that you've closed your cover letter, you just have to review it to make sure that it's ready for submission. Much like applying for a job, reviewing the cover letter for key elements such as clarity and conciseness and tone help make a good impression on your reader as it makes your letter look polished. Also, if the role is one where good communication skills are highly desired in an applicant, such as maybe a customer service role at the prize wall or at the side events booth, or maybe you're applying to an event where English speaking judges are highly desired for, I guess, guest players. Polished writing helps you put your best foot forward because that's your first snippet on how you are when you're communicating. But it's very easy to miss things in the things we write ourselves. So I recommend that you consult people regarding your letter before you click the submit button. For this purpose, I recommend two persons consult with another judge and a friend at work outside the judging world. The judge that you will talk to would be familiar with the intricacies of events and with any jargon that you use that is magic related. Because the judge would be familiar with the context of what you're writing, your tone would be better interpreted and evaluated. They would also be familiar with what would sound like overselling, like you're ballooning an accomplishment that isn't, but that might not be as big as you would think. Um, on the flip side, there is also the possibility that you're being overly modest, that you're downplaying your accomplishments in a particular event, and that self-deprecating behavior might not be something that would be desirable in a cover letter. So, um, talking to somebody who understands the context of things uh, in the magic sense would be very helpful that way. Talking to a judge would also be useful because they would be more familiar with what would constitute stating the obvious, since they can see it also from the judge manager's perspective. Had they, whether or not they've been a manager for events, a judge manager for events, they would have some idea of what constitutes stating the obvious in the magic sense. Consulting someone outside the magic world also has its merits, particularly when it comes to clarity. This is especially true when we start gushing about magic things um, in our cover letters, um, and you're aware that the person making the staffing decisions is not actually a magic judge, um, maybe just a secretary or an assistant of the TO, uh, or a translator for the TO. Uh, Being able to check with somebody whether it can actually somebody outside of the magic world whether or not your letter can actually be understood and that your message is conveyed um, can be very useful. That way, you can once again double check with who your reader is and adapt the way you word things in such a way that would be easily picked up by your reader. Um, so there, key feedback points outside of typos, outside of grammar errors, that would be tone and clarity, uh, which you can consult people, be it a break group discussion or even just by a chat on a messenger app. Um, it's very important though to not prompt the feedback of the persons you consult. Yes or no questions like, "Is this too wordy?" or no, that's one common example. Yes or no questions like that, they end the conversation abruptly, and they don't let you know how you can improve the cover letter. To be able to not prompt the feedback that you're soliciting, you can ask an open-ended question that facilitates discourse, like, um, "What's the summary of what I'm trying to say?" Or, "How would you feel if you were the one reading my letter?" Asking for the summary of what you're trying to say um, allows you a sort of like a final check on whether or not you actually conveyed what you're trying to say. I mean, if another person is able to read your letter differently and interpret it differently from what you intended, then that might be a red flag. You might have to rewrite certain things. Also, considering how a person would feel after having read your cover letter. Would they be impressed? Would they be underwhelmed? Um, it would guide you in your word selection should you choose to polish your cover letter further. If you kept your cover letter nice and short, half a page probably, your consultation with these people should be very brief, and areas for improvement will come up right away if there are any. So if they take a while to give you feedback, um, it's either they just saw your message and they're not reading your cover letter yet, or your cover letter is really long. So be wary of that. So let's just go over today's main points. As a recap, for those who might have sat out portions of the presentation and for those who just arrived. So writing a cover letter doesn't have to be a chore. One has to complete before getting accepted into an event. It can be easy, and it can be an effective way to boost your chances of getting accepted. It doesn't have to be a novel, doesn't have to be very long, and it shouldn't take up too much of your time. You just need to have a process for writing one. So first, do your research, either through the event description or through someone who has worked with the organizer before, preferably both. Next, open strong and highlight what you bring to the event. If you are aware of the challenges of the organizer has faced in the past, indicate how you can overcome them and what you've done in the past that might overcome these challenges. Next, follow through with your interests. Be honest about what you want to get from the event. Balance your goals between short-term goals and long-term goals, and present achievable targets for the event you're applying to. Next, close with a purpose. Make sure your letter can be read at a glance and connect meaningfully one last time with your closing. Before submitting your letter, work with peers to ensure the clarity of your letter and to double check your tone and whether or not your message was conveyed. Lastly, sign with a name that is familiar to the person reading your letter. That being said, thank you so much for your time. I'd love to entertain questions if there are any. Feel free to course them in the chat or unmute yourselves. Um, I'd love to talk to you guys more with the time I have remaining. Thank you so much for your time for tonight's seminar. I hope it was useful for you somehow.